Hi guys, welcome to the Channel of Love study group. We are reading Napoleon Hill, How to Raise Your Own Salary. We are on chapter 7. I was just marking a halfway point so I know where to stop. Otherwise it's going to be a long read. Okay, we're on chapter 7, Cultivate Creative Vision. A philosopher said, the imagination is the workshop of man, wherein is fashioned the pattern of all his achievements. Another thinker described it as the workshop of the soul, wherein man's hopes and desires are made ready for material expression. This chapter describes the methods by which some of the great leaders of America have, through the application of creative vision, made the American way of life the envy of the world. Observe the close relationship between this and the preceding chapter on organised individual endeavour. All forms of organised effort must be planned through creative vision. The two principles are inseparable. Hill, Mr. Carnegie, you have said that creative vision is the seventh principle of individual achievement. Will you analyse this principle and describe how one may make practical use of it? Carnegie, first of all, let us have a clear understanding of the meaning of the term creative vision, as we are here using it, by explaining that this is but another name for imagination. There's a spider dangling. I'm not even joking you to listen. Are you listening to story time? Okay. I don't think you can see it. Where's he off to? There are things that are wanting me to stop getting this chapter, stopping me from reading this chapter. Okay, you're going to sit there? Okay, so we have a spider that's joined us. Observe. Okay, let's go to where we was. Observe. You're observing. Sitting there very well. Come dangling down from somewhere. Okay. So let's go back to what Napoleon Hill was saying. Mr. Carnegie, you have said the creative vision is the seventh principle of individual achievement. Will you analyse this principle and describe how one may make practical use of it? Carnegie, first of all, let us have a clear understanding of the meaning of the term creative vision, as we are here using it, by explaining that this is but another name for imagination. There are two types of imagination. One is known as synthetic imagination, and the other as creative imagination. Synthetic imagination consists of the act of combining recognised ideas, concepts, plans, facts, and principles in new arrangements. The old axiom that there is nothing new under the sun grew out of the fact that the majority of things which seem to be new are nothing but a rearrangement of that which is old. Practically, all the patents recorded in the Patent Office are nothing more than old ideas which have been arranged in a new order or given a new use. Patents which do not come under this heading are known as basic patents, and they are the work of creative imagination. That is, they are based on newly creative ideas which have not been previously used or recognised. Creative imagination has its source, as far as science has been able to determine, in the subconscious mind, wherein exists, through some power unknown to science, the ability to perceive and interpret basically new ideas. It is believed by some that the faculty of creative imagination truly is the workshop of the soul, through which man may contact and be guided by infinite intelligence. Of this, however, there is no conclusive evidence save only that which is circumstantial. Let us therefore be content to accept the reality of creative imagination and make the best possible use of it without endeavouring to define its source. Of one fact we can be sure, and that is the undeniable reality of the existence of a faculty of the mind through which some men perceive and interpret new ideas never before known to man. Later we shall cite well-known examples of such ability. Moreover, we shall endeavour to describe how this ability may be developed and made to serve practical ends. Hill, Which of the two types of imagination is used more often in the field of industry and in the ordinary walks of life. Carnegie, synthetic imagination is more commonly used. Creative imagination, as the name implies, is used only by those who, generally speaking, have attained to some form of leadership or unusual skill. Hill, will you mention examples of the application of both types of imagination, giving as many of the details as possible, in order that the practical methods of application of these principles may be understood? Carnegie, let us take the work of Thomas A. Edison, for example. By studying his achievements, we shall see how he made use of both types of imagination, although he used the synthetic type more often. His first invention, to attract worldwide attention, was created by bringing together, in a new combination, two old and well-known principles. I refer to the incandescent electric lamp, the perfection of which was attained only after Mr. Edison had tried more than 10,000 different combinations of old ideas without satisfactory results. Hill, do you mean, Mr. Carnegie, that Mr. Edison had the persistence to keep on trying in the face of 10,000 failures? Carnegie, I mean just that, and I may as well here call your attention to the fact that men with a keen sense of imagination seldom quit trying until they find the answer to their problems. As I was saying, Mr. Edison perfected the incandescent electric lamp by combining two well-known principles in a new way. The first of these principles was the established fact that by applying electric energy to both ends of a piece of wire, a resistance is established through which the wire becomes heated to a white glow that will produce light. That principle had been known long before the time of Mr. Edison's experiments with the electric lamp, but the trouble arose from the fact that no way had been found to control the heat. Perhaps the facts will be better understood if I said that no form of metal or other substance had been found that would carry the necessary amount of heat to make a satisfactory light for more than a few seconds. The intense head of the electricity soon burned out the metal. After trying every known substance he could find, without discovering anything that would serve the desired purpose, Mr. Edison stumbled upon another well-known principle which proved to be the answer to his problem. I say he stumbled upon it, but perhaps that is not the precise way the principle came to his attention. Of that I shall have more to say on later. At any rate, there came into his mind the well-known principle by which charcoal is produced, and he recognised in it the answer to the problem that had caused him more than 10,000 failures. My spider's gone. Oh, you're just hanging around. That's cool. It's going back up. I just need a drink and to clear my throat. Okay, so after trying every known substance he could find, without discovering anything that would serve the desired purpose, Mr. Edison stumbled upon another well-known principle which proved to be the answer to his problem. I say he stumbled upon it, but perhaps this is not the precise way the principle came to his attention. Of that I shall have more to say later on. At any rate, there came into his mind the well-known principle by which charcoal is produced, and he recognised in it the answer to the problem that had caused him more than 10,000 failures. Briefly explained, charcoal is produced by placing a pile of wood on the ground, setting it on fire, and then covering the whole pile with dirt. The dirt permits just enough air to pass through to the fire to keep it alive and smouldering, but not enough to enable the fire to blaze. The smouldering process continues until the wood becomes charred through and through, leaving the log intact in the form of a substance known as charcoal. The reason the wood does not burn up entirely, as it would if left in the open air, is the fact that the dirt allows only enough oxygen to reach the fire through the intake of air to produce a smouldering condition, but not enough to cause the wood to burn up completely. You of course learned in the study of physics that where there is no oxygen, there can be no fire. That by controlling the inflow of oxygen, the amount of heat of fire can be controlled proportionately. Mr. Edison had known of this principle long before he began experimenting with the electric lamp, but not until after he had gone through thousands of tests did he think of it as being the principle for which he was searching. As soon as this principle was recognised as the one for which he was searching, he went into his laboratory, placed a coiled wire in a bottle, pumped out all the air, sealed the bottle with wax, applied the electric energy to the two ends of the wire, and lo, the world's first successful incandescent electric lamp was born. The crudely constructed lamp burned for more than 8 hours. Of course, it was obvious as to what happened. By placing the wire in a vacuum that contained no oxygen, it could be heated sufficiently to cause it to produce a light without its burning out entirely, as it had done when left in the open air. That same principle is used in the making of all incandescent electric lamps today, although the method has been greatly refined until the modern electric lamp is much more efficient than it was when Edison first discovered how to control the heat. Now, let us go back to the question as to how Mr. Edison came to think of combining these two old principles in a new way. I said he stumbled upon the idea of using the charcoal principle as a means of controlling the heat of the electric energy. But that is not exactly the way this idea occurred to him. Here begins then the entry into the picture of the principle of creative imagination. By his repetition of thought in connection with his problem, carried on over a long period of time through thousands of experiments, Mr. Edison either consciously or unconsciously charged his subconscious mind with a clear picture of his problem, and by some queer power which no one understands, his subconscious mind handed over to him the solution to his problem in the form of a hunch that caused him to think of the charcoal principle. In describing the experience many years afterward, Mr. Edison said that when the hunch came to him, he recognised it immediately as being the missing link for which he had been searching. Moreover, he felt assured it would work even before he tested it. He made the further significant statement that when the idea of using the charcoal principle flashed into his mind, it brought with it a feeling of assurance of its suitability such as did not accompany any one of the other thousands of similar ideas he had tested through synthetic imagination. From this statement, we may draw the conclusion that the subconscious mind not only has the power to create the solution to the problems, but it also has a means of forcing one to recognise the solution when it is presented to the conscious mind. Hill, from your last remark, Mr. Carnegie, I draw the conclusion that persistence was of the essence of Mr. Edison's success in the discovery of the solution to his problem. Carnegie, yes, and some other factors too. First of all, he began his research with definiteness of purpose, thus applying the first of the 17 principles of individual achievement. He knew the nature of his problem, but equally as important as this, he was determined to find its solution. Therefore, he backed his definiteness of purpose with an obsessional desire for its attainment. Obsessional desire is a state of mind which, as you will recall, serves to clear the mind of fear and doubt and self-imposed limitations, thereby opening the way for that state of mind known as faith. By his refusal to accept defeat through more than 10,000 failures, Mr. Edison prepared his mind for the application of faith. We may reasonably assume that his faith placed him in contact with infinite intelligence, wherein is known all facts and the solution to all problems which are capable of solution. Hill. Were all of Mr. Edison's inventions created through the joint application of creative imagination and synthetic imagination, as in the case of the incandescent electric lamp? Carnegie. Not by any means. The majority of his inventions were created solely through the aid of synthetic imagination, by the trial and error method of experimentation. But he did complete one invention solely through the aid of creative imagination, and as far as I know, this was the only invention he perfected through this principle alone. I have reference to the phonograph. That was basically a new idea. No one before Edison, as far as is known, had ever produced a machine that will record and reproduce the vibrations of sound. Hill. What technique did Mr. Edison use in the application of creative imagination in perfecting the talking machine? Carnegie. The technique was very simple. He impressed his subconscious mind with the idea of a talking machine, and there passed over to his conscious mind a perfect plan for building of such a machine. Hill. Do you mean that Edison relied on creative imagination entirely? Carnegie. Yes, entirely. And one of the strange features of this particular invention of Mr. Edison's is the fact that the plan which his subconscious mind yielded to him worked almost from the first attempt to apply it. The idea of how such a machine could be produced flashed into Edison's mind. He sat down then and there and drew a rough picture of the machine, handed it to his model maker, and asked him to produce the machine, and in a matter of hours it was finished, tested, and lo, it worked. Of course the machine was crude, but it was sufficient to prove that Edison's creative imagination had not failed him. Hill. You say that Mr. Edison impressed his subconscious mind with the idea of a talking machine. Now, how did he go about doing this, and how long did it require before his subconscious mind handed over to him the working principle of the machine? Carnegie. I am not sure that Mr. Edison stated exactly how long he had been thinking of such a machine before his subconscious mind picked up his thoughts and translated them into a perfected plan, but I am under the impression it was not more than a few weeks at most, perhaps not more than a few days. His method of impressing his subconscious mind with his desire consisted of the simple procedure of converting that desire into an obsession. That is, the thought of a machine that would record and reproduce sound became the dominating thought of his mind. He focused his mind on it through concentration of his interest and made it the major occupant of his mind from day to day until this form of autosuggestion penetrated his subconscious mind and registered a clear picture of his desire. Hill. Is that the way one connects the subconscious mind with the subconscious, Mr. Carnegie? Carnegie. Yes, that is the simplest known method. You see, therefore, why I have emphasised the importance of intensifying one's desires until they become obsessional. A deep burning desire is picked up by the subconscious and acted upon much more definitely and quickly than an ordinary desire. A mere wish appears to make no impression on the subconscious. Many people become confused as to the difference between a wish and a burning desire, which has been stimulated into obsessional proportions by the repetition of thought in connection with the desire. Hill. If I understand you correctly, Mr. Carnegie, the element of repetition is important. Why? Carnegie. Because repetition of thought creates thought habits in the mind, which cause the mind to go right on working on an idea without one's conscious effort. Apparently, the subconscious concerns itself first with those thoughts which have become habits, and especially if the thoughts have been strongly emotionalised by a deep and burning desire for their realisation. Hill, then anyone may make use of creative imagination by the simple process of charging his subconscious mind with definite desires. Carnegie, yes, there is nothing to hinder anyone from using this principle, but you must remember that practical results are obtained only by those who have gained discipline over their thought habits through the process of concentration of interest and desire. Fleeting thoughts, which come and go intermittently, and mere wishes, which are about the extent of the average person's thinking, make no impression whatsoever on the subconscious mind. I will have more to say on this subject when we discuss self-discipline. Author's notes. The subject of habit and its effect on individual achievement will be covered thoroughly in another chapter of this book under the title of Cosmic Habit Force, a newly discovered law of nature which promises to become of the utmost importance in connection with the power of thought. Nothing was known of this law at the time Mr. Carnegie was analysing this subject, although his description of the manner in which the subconscious mind can be reached and influenced harmonises perfectly with the nature of cosmic habit force. Hill, will you mention some additional examples of the practical application of the two types of imagination? Carnegie, well, take the experience of Henry Ford in connection with his perfection of a self-propelled vehicle, for example. The idea of such a vehicle was first suggested to him by a steam-propelled tractor that was being used to haul a threshing machine. From the first time that he saw the tractor, his mind began to work on the idea of a horseless buggy. At first, he used only the principle of synthetic imagination by centering his mind on ways and means of converting the steam tractor into a rapid-moving vehicle for the transportation of passengers. The idea became obsessional with him, and it had the effect of conveying his burning desire to his subconscious mind, where it was picked up and acted upon. The action of the subconscious mind suggested to him the use of an internal combustion engine to take the place of the steam engine, and he went to work immediately on the creation of such an engine. Of course, he had the experiments of other men in connection with internal combustion gas engines as a guide, but his problem was to find a way to convey the power of the engine to the wheels of a vehicle. He kept his mind charged with his major purpose until, step by step, his subconscious mind presented him with ideas with which he perfected the planetary system of power transmission, which enabled him to perfect his first working model of an automobile, Model T. Hill, will you describe the major factors which entered into the modus operandi of Mr. Ford's mind while he was perfecting the automobile? Carnegie, that will be very easy, and when I describe them, you will have a clear understanding of the working principles used by all men, as well as a clear picture of the Ford mind, viz. Okay. A. Mr. Ford was motivated by a definite purpose, which is the first step in all individual achievements. B. He stimulated his purpose into an obsession by concentrating his thoughts upon it. C. He converted his purpose into definite plans through the principle of organised individual endeavour and put his plans into action with unabating persistence. D. He made use of the mastermind principle, first by the harmonious aid of his wife, and secondly, by gaining counsel from others who had experimented with internal combustion engines and methods of power transmission. Still later, of course, when he began to produce automobiles for sale, he made a still more extensive use of the mastermind principle by allying himself with the Dodge brothers and other mechanics and engineers skilled in the sort of mechanical problems he had to solve. Back of all this effort was the power of applied faith, which he acquired as a result of his intense desire for achievement in connection with his definite major purpose. Hill. Summarised briefly, Mr. Ford's success was due to having adopted a definite major purpose, which he fanned into a white-heat flame of obsession, thus leading to the stimulation of both the faculties of synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Carnegie. That tells the story in one sentence. That part of the story that should be emphasised is the fact that Mr. Ford moved with persistence. At first, he met with one form of defeat after another. One of his major difficulties was lack of capital with which to carry on his research before he perfected his automobile. After that came a still greater difficulty in connection with procuring the necessary operating capital to produce his automobiles in quantity production. Then followed a series of difficulties such as disagreements with the members of his mastermind group and other similar problems, all of which called for persistence and determination. These qualities Mr. Ford possesses, and I think we might say he owes his success to his ability to know exactly what he wants and his capacity to stand by his wants with unrelenting persistence. If one single quality stands out in the Ford character above all others, it is his capacity for persistence. Let me remind you again that definiteness of purpose backed with a form of persistence that assumes the proportion of an obsession is the greatest of all stimulants of both the synthetic and the creative forms of imagination. The mind of man is provided with a power which forces the subconscious mind to accept and to act upon obsessional desires that are definitely planned. Hill, will you now cite some other examples of the practical application of imagination? Carnegie. Take, for example, Dr. Alexander Graham Bell's research in connection with the modern telephone. Here we have an example of the use of creative imagination for Bell's invention was basically new. Let us say that he, like Edison, stumbled upon the principle that made the telephone practical while searching for some mechanical device with which he could create a hearing aid for his wife, whose hearing was impaired. Here again, we find a man who was inspired by a definite purpose which assumed obsession proportions. His keen sympathy for his wife was the factor that gave obsessional force to his purpose. In this case, as in all others, where men give obsessional proportions to their desires, a definite motive was behind his desire. Motive is the beginning of all desires. Through a long period of research that is too involved in detail for description here, Dr. Bell's subconscious mind finally presented him with an idea which served his purpose. It became known to the scientific world as Bell's experiment, the substance of which was this. A ray of light is cast upon a plate of selenium, which sends the ray back to another plate, some distance away, of the same metal. This latter communicates with a galvanic battery to which a telephone is attached. The words uttered behind the first plate are distinctly heard through the telephone at the end of the second plate. The ray of light, accordingly, has served as a telephone wire. the sound waves have become transferred into light waves, the latter into galvanic waves, and these have become once again sound waves. Thus, a basically new principle for conveying sound waves was uncovered. It has been claimed that the principle, in part, was suggested to Dr. Bell by the experiments of a man by the name of Dolbear. There was a lawsuit over the priority of right to the principle, but Mr. Dolbear lost the suit, and Dr. Bell was declared to have been the discoverer of the working principle of the modern telephone. At any rate, Dr. Bell's desire for a mechanical hearing aid for his wife, backed by a persistent search for such a device, led to the discovery of the principle he needed. It must be remembered that the subconscious mind makes use of every practical means available for revealing knowledge to those seeking it with obsessional desire. It performs no miracles, but it makes intelligent use of all practical media available in carrying out its purpose. Hill. Now, Mr. Carnegie, let us get away from the field of invention and see how the principle of imagination may be applied in the less complicated fields of endeavour. And we will carry on reading in our next visit. Okay, guys, so take care. Much love. Bye for now.